Welcome to the Schenectady City Board of Education meeting of March 2nd, 2016. A really cold night, but we've heard promises of 70 degrees next week, so stay tuned. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we started right about 7 tonight. All right. We have an amended agenda, slightly amended. I would accept a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
John, second.
Second.
Mark? Any discussion? What was added, Martha? Was there something added or something taken out?
Actually, there is nothing added. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, so it was the same,
put
it was the
wrong
same
words
as
in
what
your
we
mouth.
had been sent then. All right, fine. I wasn't certain about that. All right, all those in favor of the original agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have our minutes of February 24th, 2016. Are there any changes to these minutes? I know a couple people have already noted a couple changes to Martha. One of which was that we had Miss Woodson's book is Brown Girl Dreaming as opposed to Brown Girls Dreaming, and the illustrator who visited us, Brian Collier, did not illustrate that particular book. He had illustrated at least one other book I'm aware of by Miss Woodson, but Brown Girl Dreaming is not an illustrated book, so it's for older kids. So just made that correction in the minutes. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the minutes as already corrected?
So moved.
Ann, second?
Second.
Durham? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We now have privilege of the floor, and I have 3 people signed up. The first person I have signed up is Kanima. And Kanima, if you come up to the microphone. I see the one on the right, your right, has a red light. I don't see it on the other one, so. This microphone on the table, right?
This one, okay.
Yeah. They both, should I have a light there, or do I? It's very faint if it is.
Well, good evening, Superintendent, Mr. Spring, and all the board members here tonight. First, I would just like to say that I'm part of the coalition right now that's fighting for the equity education here in Schenectady, and we are doing a great job. It was nice to see Ms. Lewis. I've seen her on a couple occasions when in the community during our petition drive, and it just feels good to know that we're all coming together as a community to get the funding that we need for our students, for the Schenectady City School District. And with that being said, we will be able to provide our children here in the community with more resources to help them be successful here in the Schenectady City School District. So I'm really happy to be a part of that cause, and I will continue to fight and do whatever I need to do in order to ensure that we get our fair part of the funding for our children. Now, on to my concern as a parent of children in the Schenectady City School District. I had come to a meeting, I think it was in January or maybe February, but I had spoke of the Student Code of Conduct, how I thought it was kind of outdated and it needed to be updated. I had some concerns as to the consequences for some offenses that would happen within the Schenectady City School District. And again, I would just like to reiterate that I strongly urge the Student of Conduct Committee to get together and look at the Student of the code of conduct and revise it where the consequences for the offenses that these children are committing is meaningful, and it's going to actually deter the behavior and not have these kids want to leave school or don't want to be part of their education process anymore. Specifically, I'm talking about the lateness to class and the truancy. I'm seeing that the consequences is that if someone is late for class, again, in school suspension. Again, I don't understand how this is going to deter the behavior. Again, the child is still being taken out of instruction, and it's not meaningful. So, and even with truancy, they get suspended from school if they're truant. Again, that's not meaningful. So I just really urge that you guys get together and look at some of these things and hopefully can revise it so that our students here in the Schenectady City School District can be successful, and we can make sure that we're being just as proactive in their educational process as, you know, the parents are. Thank you.
Kanima, I need to ask you, you didn't write down your last name here. I need to have
Oh,
it.
it's Haynes, Haynes.
Thank you. And also, just wanted to mention to you that the process for our code of conduct is that that's usually revised towards the end of this year, and we have public comment on it in usually mid to the end of July and pass it in August for the succeeding year.
Okay.
So that's sort of the timing. I just wanted to mention that too.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Lewis.
Okay, thank you. The next person I have signed up is Iva. Have I read that right, or is it Ivy? I can't quite tell.
Mine is just something small.
I need your last name too.
Gay.
Sorry?
Gay.
G-A-Y?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
As a parent, my concern is over the student handbook and the parent handbook. We have other parents that think it's okay to come into the schools, vaping in the schools while they're in the building, because it's not listed clearly that vaping is not allowed and that it can cause harm to others. They think just because the handbook tells them no smoking and there's no smoking signs, that vaping is still allowed.
Oh, vaping. I didn't understand
Yes.
what words you had said. I'm sorry. I was about to
So
ask
they're
you.
coming in and they're
Yeah.
still doing that, and and you'll have parents tell you until they see a sign where it's listed somewhere that they're not allowed to do that, they're going to continue doing it in school buildings and on school grounds because that's not listed as smoking.
Okay. Thank you. I have to say it's something I would never thought of, so, but I'm not a
Well,
smoker.
as an employee, it's something I see every afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
We have a small group of parents who come in and they're heavy vapors, and every day I have to tell them, I'm sorry, you may not vape in the building, and they'll still do it, and their excuse is, here's the handbook, show me where it says it's not allowed. They'll point out that it says no smoking
But
on school grounds, on school property, but nowhere does it say that. And I get every day until I hear
I
or
understand.
see it visually in writing, I'm going to continue to do it.
Okay. Have you spoken with the building principal about
Yes,
that?
I have.
Okay. Which building is that?
Here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the third person I have signed up is Keisha Darnell. Keisha, you gave me your last name. I don't have to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm here for elaboration to what Kanima has said. As a parent of the Schenectady School District, my problem is the discipline. My son, who's also sometimes have been a problem for the school, he's getting suspended, and upon suspension, for whatever the cause was, when he gets back to school, the work I've requested from the teachers to give him the work so that he can make up, they're not meeting my requests. I've called, asked, speak with the guidance, still not meeting my requests. He's He's doing his part by accepting his suspension and doing what he has to do. But when he gets back to school, he's so far behind. And my son ended up failing the very first semester due to this, because he was suspended for 2 weeks and was unable to make up his final grades and all this other stuff. So those tests went unanswered for him, and everything got submitted, and of course they were the biggest part of the grades or that class, and he didn't receive the points for it. So my thing is, when these kids are being suspended, and as Kanima stated, she stated, it makes them feel like they don't want to be a part of their own education and their growth. When you have the faculty not helping them set some goals for themselves, it becomes very hard for them to succeed. If the teachers are saying, okay, well, Shakri, while you were out of school, we had this amount of work, here you go, I need you to complete it, and give him that allotted time. I'm not saying that he should always have that allotted time, because yeah, he did mess up, but at some point, it has to be some relevance in there where he can make up this work.
Okay.
And another thing I wanted to touch on is when the referrals are being sent, I'll get a referral from February 2nd or February 22nd. And it's kind of hard to discipline your child at home when these referrals are coming 2-3 weeks later. Or the phone calls are not being made. I sent emails. I got email, phone call, and my work number. There's some way you can get in contact with me. I shouldn't be hearing about my son 2-3 weeks later. And as a whole, we are here for these children to come together, and at some point, faculty and parent need to say, okay, we have to brainstorm to better feed these kids. And that's my complaint today.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day, guys. Thank you.
All right, that's all the people I have signed up at the moment, so we will now go to the superintendent.
Okay, before I get into my comments, if I can just kind of talk about discipline a little bit, respond to those comments. So one of the things about why the consequences are structured the way they are within school suspension and out of school suspension is that those are really the only consequences that the regulations allow us to do. And so we can't issue as a consequence a lot of the things that we think that kids really need. And that's why we use this mechanism that we call an abeyance. And a student will be suspended for a certain number of weeks. But if they do the things that we think they really need, because we don't think that just being out of school for a number of weeks will actually help anything, but if they go and get some counseling or get some assistance with something that will help them and help them be ready to return to school, we put that in as an abeyance term. We can't make them, go to counseling or go do those things. We can't administer that as a consequence. The law doesn't allow us to do that, but we try as much as possible to afford that as an opportunity, as an alternative to the consequence. And I understand what you're saying, and that's something that we're in process of putting in place across the district. We don't have that as an offering for every consequence, across the board yet, but we're certainly working hard towards that. And then in terms of once a student is suspended and wanting to get the work to the student for tutoring, that's absolutely an expectation that we have. And if the work isn't there, the student certainly should have an equal amount of time to make up that work. And if those expectations are not being met, I encourage you to use the chain of command and continue to make those phone calls, not just stop at guidance or the building principal, but I think that's an extraordinarily fair expectation to have, that work come to your child, and we want to work to make sure that your student has the opportunity to do that work, and if they didn't, that they've got an equal amount of time to make it up and not be penalized just because the end of the quarter has come up. So other than those comments, there are a couple of things that I wanted to touch base on. So the new accountability measures came out. The State Education Department announced new accountability levels. Well, we as a district are still a focused district, and that means that we have some reasonably significant things that we need to do in every one of our schools. We did have 2 schools that previously were identified for receivership, and one of those schools was removed from that list. So I want to congratulate the folks at Hamilton Elementary for the hard work that they have been doing. And I might also congratulate the State Education Department for accepting a little bit of logic and realism into their determinations. They didn't accept everything that we've argued for, but they at least took a look at what was going on in Hamilton and recognized there that we had some outstanding things going on. We also had improvements in some of our other schools, but certainly Hamilton coming off of receivership is our biggest news. And I think lots of folks know that today was Read Across America Day. Lots of folks celebrating Dr. Seuss's birthday. I know I went into a classroom today and read Green Eggs and Ham, had a lot of fun. Kids were very excited about that. Anything that we can do to get kids excited about reading is a great plus. So those are our happenings right now.
I'm just going to take a moment before I go to the other board members and mention that the majority of us were able to visit on Monday with Senators Farley and Amador over at the Legislative Office Building to discuss the funding situation and what might we anticipate in this year's actions that they'd be taking. We learned that both of them are supporting a bill by Senator Griffo. I believe I have that right. It may have also been known as Assemblyman Brandini's bill, but it would add $96 million, as I understand it, to foundation aid. And of course, that's the area of the budget that we would most benefit from. So hopefully that might be something that we would count on. We discussed with him any number of other things, investment tax credit, pre-K services, help me remember some of the other areas, tax cap, and all those kinds of things. So we had a good visit there. Following up on Kanima's comment regarding the coalition for getting the signatures, it was my understanding that there is a bus trip planned for next Monday to the Capitol for up to 44 people, right? You have one bus, and I don't know any of the particulars beyond that. If you want me to say something, what time is it leaving?
It'll be leaving Emmanuel Freedom's Church
On Knott Terrace.
at 9:30 a.m.
9:30.
If anybody wants to, who's interested, they can get in touch with Bernardo Martinez. He's going to be registering people for the bus to leave out there.
I think Bernardo is sitting behind you. Okay, very good. So just to clarify, the bus will be leaving at 9:30 from Emmanuel Frieden's on Knott Terrace on March 7th, and you're having up to 44 people, at least at this point, right, who could attend. So that's just following on that.
Ms. Lewis, just to add to that, I think some of the clergy members in the community is coming together to get their vans to take some of their.
Oh, there may be additional.
Yes, so we're trying to.
Sort of a convoy, is that what we're looking at going over
We're
that?
trying to get as many as possible.
And I know this sounds like a poor excuse, but I am having the rest of a root canal on Monday morning, so I probably would prefer to go to the Legislative Office Building, but I had already made that appointment, so I will not be able to attend. So now we'll turn our attention here. Dharam, did you have anything?
You just mentioned everything that I was going to say.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought maybe since several of us
I
went.
just want to thank the folks that's here, that's going out Monday. Thank you very much for standing up for our kids.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Cheryl?
Nothing.
Mark?
Yes, just piggybacking off of what we were just mentioning. Tomorrow, there's going to be a rally at Lincoln Elementary School, sponsored by Citizen Action and the New York State United Teachers, to, I'll just read it off of here, to stand up for our schools for the funding we need and deserve. Let our local and state representatives know that we need support for our schools and families. It's taking place tomorrow at 7:15 a.m. at Lincoln Elementary School.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. All right. Ann?
Yeah, I just had a couple things. I just wanted to follow up on Larry congratulating the wrestling team last week. They did really well, and very proud of what the boys did there. Larry and I both went last Thursday to Boys Night Out here at Mount Pleasant. And it was great to see our young men in the community here having good fun. They were playing basketball, they were having pizza, they were playing board games right over here. And there were a lot of male volunteers, including there was a retired Mount Pleasant teacher who apparently lives in the neighborhood, and he was here, and it was great to talk to him. Some of us, Kathy, John, and I, is that everybody who went? We had the opportunity last
know what you're gonna
Friday
say.
to go to Martin Luther King and
Right.
have lunch with the illustrator Brian Collier, who'd done a program with our students at MLK, and he was fascinating. He had so many stories to tell. I'd love to see him come back and talk to kids of all ages, including our high school kids, about what it takes to become an illustrator, because he was really interesting. And then Kathy and I, on Saturday, we went, and I did see one of our teachers there, to a talk that sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Saratoga on the Common Core. There were some expert opinions on that. It kind of devolved into a shouting match at one point, but we got something out of it, I suppose. And then we went to the conference. I have two other things to mention. The Friends of Music is having their annual Flapjack Breakfast fundraiser on the 13th of this month from 8 to 10. It's listed on the website. I guess they've mailed these out late, so if anyone's interested, I have some, and they've also extended the date. It said all orders need to be received by March 4th. They said you could instead do an email order and pay at the door. So if anyone's interested, I might stick them on the table over there and you can grab those. And there's also on Friday, the 11th of March, at the high school, Ray Vega, who is a professional musician, will be doing we'll be working with our students for 4 days. And then on that Friday, there's a free concert at 7. He will be there. The high school jazz bands will be there. Kids from Central Park, so I assume the Jazz Mob will be there. And also some of our other faculty will be playing with him. So that sounds like a really great time, and I hope people can come out to see that. And I think that's everything.
John?
Just to go back to what Larry said, regarding discipline, one of the concepts that comes up a lot is restorative justice, where you try and make the offense or the penalty for the offense sort of deal with what happened, so that if somebody was injured, you would then try and have a penalty that spoke to what the damage that was done and had the individual address those damages. But that's, again, something that we can't necessarily mandate. So what we try to do is hold a portion of the penalties that we are allowed to implement in abeyance, as Larry said, and then come up with an appropriate thing that the child can sort of volunteer to do, if you would, or the parents can work with the child to do. And it's always something worth bringing up if you have an issue in the schools. Well, what can we do that really speaks to what happened? And I think there's a lot of people that would be open to that. And so don't think that just because somebody's suspended that's the last word on it. The other thing is we did meet with Senators Amador and Farley. I was encouraged. I know that in the Assembly we've got very strong support, and I'm optimistic about the things we heard. And then Ann mentioned the illustrator at MLK, and I do believe the library has purchased some of the original works, so that at some point in time you'll be able to go to the library and see because he works in a fairly large format that obviously gets shrunk down to the books, and Brian's work was interesting. His stories were wonderful. So
You're talking about the Phyllis Bourne Library, the new library on State Street, right?
I'm not sure where they're putting them, but I know they
They're,
bought
they're,
two.
no,
That's
they're,
where they
they're
are?
actually two there. They're
Okay.
actually, there's one in the entryway and one just around the corner
Okay.
there of his works. It was interesting to meet him and hear his stories. As Ann said, he had fascinating stories. My husband has always been a fan of Langston Hughes, and one of the stories that he told about was visiting Langston Hughes's home or house in Harlem. And I didn't even know that that's where it was, and he was telling us the story that it's generally not open to the public, but there's some sort of agreement that the person who lives there has to let anyone in if you knocked on the door and give them a tour. And so that was fascinating. That may be something we do at some point in that. And Brian Collier has illustrated a book concerning a visit to Langston Hughes' house. I have a couple of other things. One of the other things I did this weekend, and I told you I've done some fascinating things recently. I'd mentioned the wrestling tournament a few weeks ago. Well, I went to the cheerleading Midnight Madness this past Saturday night, and that's an experience. Not one I'd ever had before, but there were a number of teams. The entire half of the benches and bleachers were relegated for the various teams, but I learned that Schenectady does not compete in a cheerleading madness that they host. So we were, the guides and getting people in the proper places and so on. But it was interesting to see the cheers. Frankly, I fear the heights that these people are thrown to or drop down from. So I, never did it in my youth, and I'm certainly not going to be doing it now. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I had a letter that came to me. It was not specifically for mentioning us, but in the letter it was from Concern for the Hungry, which many of you know in this community. They're the ones who do the Thanksgiving baskets, and they acknowledged and thanked the staff and students at William Kane Elementary School who loan us their gym and kitchen for 7 days in November in order to do those programs. So I just wanted to also acknowledge them at this point. And that's pretty much, I think, what I have. If we think of something, we can mention it later. Moving on, we come to the second quarter academic report. Or did we skip the policy updates afterwards? And we have Tanda.
Yes.
Welcome. Tanda and others.
I have helpers. Of course, technology, right? Can you hear me okay?
Maybe a little bit, lift it up a little bit more. I think we need a little louder.
How's that?
Can you hear back on the
Can you hear in the back?
television? Is it okay? I think so. I think you're all right now.
Okay. I can talk very loudly if I have to. So I'm very happy to be here. This has been a great learning experience preparing this report for you tonight. And I continue to challenge myself to continue to improve on this as we go along. So hopefully in the future you'll have this a week in advance so that you can ask questions. I know that getting it tonight and having it on board docs, you probably haven't had a lot of time to go through it. So please feel free, if you have questions as you go through it in the next week or so, to email them to the superintendent, and we'll do our best to get them answered for you. I first want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank the Office of Planning and Accountability for helping me pull and mine the data, and that Lori's here to talk about part of the presentation for us. I want to thank Sean for being here, and he's going to talk very specifically about the Move To initiative and how he's doing it in his building. And I want to thank the coordinators who are in the audience to support this presentation and answer the questions that I still don't have the answers to.
Okay.
So given that, I want to go over just some of the highlights that I pulled out of the findings from the data. That would be the packet that you have that looks like this.
Okay.
So as I think about attendance and oops. Is there a problem? Okay. As I think about attendance, you know, we can't teach the students we don't get to school, so that's why attendance is part of the academic report. And I just wanted to also note that all of the findings in here are relating to all students at this, unless it's otherwise noted. So I did not get down into the subgroups for the most part. And what I noted here was the high school actually had the most stable attendance across all the grades as we looked K-12. So I think that raises some questions. What can we do at the elementary and middle school levels to improve that attendance? I believe the perfect attendance actually went up in the second quarter for the high school. Considering the district's discipline history with disproportionality, I did separate this out by subgroup for black students, and you can see that it's still disproportionate.
Should this be changing up here?
No. No.
Okay.
This is on board docs.
Yeah, I have it
Yeah.
here. I just didn't know for the purposes of the audience, so.
So the reason we look at the discipline data is, of course, the issue that was just brought up earlier. How do we keep students in school as much as we can in order to instruct them and assure that all students have access to an academic program regardless of ethnicity? With regards to elementary academics, what really stood out here was that third grade math seemed to be an anomaly, both last year and this year, both last quarter and this quarter. So in talking with our math coordinator, it's a question of how do we dig deeper with that data? Is it the test? Or are we having an exceptional program in the third grade level? If it were an exceptional program in the third grade level, we would expect to see last year's third grade data results carry over into this year's fourth grade results, and they didn't. So that kind of tells us that maybe we need to look at that test, see if it's really a valid test.
You're talking about the interim assessment?
The interim assessment.
For the third grade
For the third grade.
specifically?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the fact that it's aligned is a question, not.
It really is a question because
the anomaly of it.
If you look at the patterns across the others, the correlation seems to be that the interim is much lower than the other assessments.
With regard to the attendance, Tanda, this is just the quarter results. It's not a cumulative, including the first and second quarters.
That was one of my first questions when I looked at this data is, does this include the first quarter? And no, it's separate and unique from the first quarter results.
Okay, good, thanks.
While we're just back on the attendance page, just momentarily, it says, and you mentioned that the high school seems to have the most stable attendance. Is there anything that you think we can attribute that to? Is what's working at the high school maybe that we're not doing in the other schools?
Yeah, I think that's part of the next steps with this. So I think the best data really leads you to more questions than answers, right? And so I think the next step is, okay, so where do we need to look? What's working, what's not working there, and how do we transfer it over?
So that's to be determined.
Yes.
And one obvious answer is last year in the budget process, we approved an engagement dean at the high school. Whether or not that's a difference maker, we're not sure, but that's low-hanging fruit in terms of what's a difference that exists there.
So, and I would still need to ask that question, what did we do at the high school? So I'm still learning. Okay, so for middle school academics, I actually was quite impressed with the correlation between the STAR assessment and the interim assessments from quarter 1 to quarter 2. So I'm wondering, does that show some kind of correlation or reliability that we want to look at, and how does that impact what we do next?
So we use Ames Web as a measurement in K to 6, and STAR in 7 and 8.
Yep.
Okay.
And then for social studies and science in the middle school, that's all report card grades. And as I think about that, I think about, okay, so what do we really want our report cards to reflect that students know and are able to do? And, are they reflecting that? Because they really are showing that they're pretty stable across the 2 quarters. The 9th grade math at the high school, that the interim showed that the 9th grade math was really a little stronger, and then it trailed off after that in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So what's the level of rigor of that interim, and how does it inform us with regards to the algebra regents? Would be something I'd want to look at. And then last, as I think about the January regents and all of the data that we got there in January and how that relates to graduation, I'm thinking about how we need to continue to review this data. How do we go deeper with root cause analysis? As we go into a root cause analysis, which would tell us some of the potential reasons why. If there's an opportunity that presents itself, how do we develop the action plan to address that opportunity? If there's a celebration going on, how can we look to replicate that across other settings so that we can get similar results? And last but not least, what are the effectiveness of the programs that lead up to, for example, the January regents? Is the foundations class being effective? Are students accessing that? Are there other programs in place that we can support students to have better results? Because while the results were pretty strong and we got 409 students to pass Regents exams in January, we still have 61% of the students who took the Regents in January who didn't pass. And so those are the things that we still need to address, and I'm looking forward to addressing.
Is it a full complement of Regents exams that's offered in January? I just simply don't know the answer to that question myself.
I don't either.
I mean, you've highlighted the ELA Common Core and the Algebra Common Core and the English Regents exam, and as I look at those percentages, it wouldn't come up to 39% of those taking exams.
No,
so
there were.
So I don't know what the other subjects are that they take exams.
So there were
in.
the sciences and the social studies.
And the social science.
Yep.
That's right. I know we have to have the social science
Yep.
or the global history or whatever. Diane is indicating something back here.
Yeah, and it's all the exams, and keep in mind, January is generally the time of year for students who are retaking it.
Right.
Or who have struggled. And so those are, for some students, the ones who are challenging the most and may have had to take it 1 or 2 times. And for those to get 400, it was one of our stronger Januaries, and so we were very pleased with our results. But again, as Tanda said, we're always looking for those places where we saw significant growth, and particularly this year, we were looking for growth in the global history, and we saw that growth significantly, and we targeted specific growth around that, and so we're able to learn in that specific area. So we're still working towards that. Actually, we had an integrated algebra that was a little bit later. We actually had 9 out of 13 in the high school who took that passed who were seniors. And so we're really
Great.
thrilled. We're super celebrating that, because that means an opportunity to cross the stage. So again, as Tanda said, we're always looking at those specific elements around that. So
Thank you.
Thank you. So in general, there's a fair complement, a pretty good complement of exams that are given at that time, and the numbers in each one might be low, but obviously contribute to a success rate if that's the one they needed, so.
Yep.
Okay,
And in
good.
the actual report, it's on page 51
Page 51.
for Regent.
So
I was
do
reading
we-
it on an iPad this afternoon.
Yeah.
It was a little.
So,
And do we post this report on the website?
yes. Not till you've seen it.
Hmm?
Not until you've seen
We
it.
don't post it until you see it, but the next day we put it on the website.
Okay.
So if anybody goes to the main page where it says academics, you go in there, you can get the full history of the academic reports from each year.
Okay.
So with that, I would like to zero in on move 2 and turn it over to Lori McKenna.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello. So during the first academic quarterly report, we focused on or highlighted AIMSweb and the use of data to inform instructional decisions. For this quarter, second quarter report, we're going to focus your attention on what we call the Move 2 strategy. And the Move 2 strategy, you're probably wondering where it came from. So let me just give you a little bit of a background on where that came from.
2012.
Well, I won't quote a year. I'm not sure how far back it goes, but I know it since Larry has been here.
That's right.
So,
The first year.
3.5 years. So the Move 2 strategy really came from the Board of Ed goals. And as you know, from the Board of Ed goals, the district has a theory of action, and from that theory of action, there are what we call target setting documents for the district and for each of our schools in the district. The Board of Ed goal and the targets for our district and our schools is to increase proficiency by 8%, not only for reading for our students, but also for our state assessments, including the 3 through 8 assessments for ELA and math, and also for the Regents exams, and finally for graduation, for the graduation rate. The Move 2 strategy is where every teacher of ELA and math across the district, whether it's kindergarten or in 12th grade, and those teachers at the high school in science and social studies, because remember we're talking about Regents exams and also graduation rate, identify 2 students who are close to proficiency, and with that Move 2 strategy or intervention can move from being close to proficiency to proficiency. And if every single teacher of ELA and reading maintained the students who were proficient from last year to this year and increased by 2 students in every classroom, the district would recognize or see an 8% increase in our ELA and math, New York State assessment scores, our Regents exams, and also our graduation rate because of the connection between the Regents passing the Regents exams. Does that make sense?
Yes. Whoa. Is that out of focus? Or is it my eyeball?
So you're probably wondering how teachers and principals identify the Move 2 students for this specific intervention. The district provided every principal with a roster report that had a scale score from the New York State assessments in ELA and math to what we call a proficiency ranking. The closer the proficiency ranking is to a 3, for example, the closer the student is to scoring a level 3 on the New York State ELA or math assessment. So principals also use, and teachers also use other data sets other than the New York State assessments. And you'll hear Mr. Ingley in just a minute talk a little bit about the AIMSweb and how he incorporates the AIMSweb data into his Move 2 strategy, specifically at Pleasant Valley. So the teacher in collaboration with the principal select the 2 students, and from that, they prescribe an intervention to address the deficiency, so to speak, in order to move the student from not proficient to proficiency. So if you look up here in what's on your screen, you'll see in the far right-hand column a proficiency ranking. So the first 2 students the first student has a proficiency ranking of 2.87, and the second student has a proficiency ranking of 2.78. Those 2 students are the 2 closest students as defined by the scale score from the New York State assessment in grade 3 ELA, as being really close to proficiency, meaning that level 3. And we may be talking about 1 or 2 points to get them to that level 3. So that's 1 or 2 multiple choice questions, just to put things in perspective. Then after the students are identified, there is also the expectation from the district that students are monitored for progress toward proficiency on a regular basis. Again, the district has that expectation, but the district did not prescribe what that looks like. So if you went into 17 different buildings, you would probably see 17 different ways that our schools are progress monitoring the Move To strategy students. But here is just an example that you might find in one of our buildings. And again, Sean's is a little bit different from what you would see up here, but this is just to give you a flavor of how our schools are monitoring. And again, it is the expectation that they are monitored. So for example, if you had, 4 students, 2 sections of 4th grade and 2 students from both of those sections, you would see where they were based on their baseline data, and then there's a box to progress monitor along the way, whether it's through the use of Ames Web data or the interim assessment results. Wait, we skipped a slide. And I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that there are many ways to monitor a student's progress depending on the grade level. If you are monitoring progress toward proficiency in reading for students in grade K through 2, for example, you would expect to see data from Ames Web, which we talked about last time, which is one of our assessment systems. If you are monitoring progress toward the New York State assessments, you would expect to see a principal and a teacher and the intervention specialist using the interim assessment data to progress monitor along the way. Of course, there are other things happening in between each of the interim assessment assessments to monitor progress. The example that you see up here on the screen, again, is just one way. Sean will talk a little bit about another way that he progress monitors the students who are a part of the Move To strategy.
Will we get this handout separately? Because right from my perspective right now, it looks like a construction site, so.
Yes.
I actually can't read it at all.
And I think Cheryl's cut off from seeing it, so.
So this is just 2 different ways that you can look at the data. So what the first
Lower left.
lower left-hand side of the slide is showing you is that how the grade 4 students on the ELA interim performed from October to December. So if you could see this slide, you would see that 2 students scored at level 1 on the October ELA interim, and then those 2 students moved to level 2 in December. So we're seeing them move from one level
And
to
these
the
were
next.
2 specific students.
2 specific students. This slide also shows you that there are 2 students in October at level 2, and those same 2 students stayed the same. There was 1 student at level 2 in October, and 1 student moved to a level 3. So you can see from this slide, and again, if you're a graphic person, you can look at the arrows, you can hover over the numbers, and you can see the names of the students, etc. If you're more of a read a chart type of a person, that's available too. Again, this is one way. If you looked in 17 different buildings, you would see probably a combination of 17 different ways of progress monitoring. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Sean, and he'll walk you through his Move To plan and talk about the success that he's seeing in his school.
Hello.
Hello.
So I was asked to come here and talk about our Move To process and systems that we have in place at Pleasant Valley. And I guess I need to start, and you can see up there it says 2014-15. We started last year really instituting SMART goals, putting in a process during our grade level meetings, we call them, where we meet with the teachers, the intervention specialists, the special ed teachers, whoever else might be involved with that grade level. And we talk about and we use assessments, the Ames Web or the ELSA, the interim assessments, the New York State assessments, to determine where students may need some extra assistance. And these typically were students in the bottom 20% of our classes that saw reading specialists or intervention specialists and those kinds of things. But the point I'm trying to make is that those SMART goal sheets were brought into our school in Pleasant Valley that year, And as we move forward into this year and started talking about our Move 2 students, we used the same sheet. So we didn't change the process. So the teachers were aware of it. They knew how to fill out the sheet. They knew how to progress monitor. With the SMART Goal Intervention kiddos, the reading teachers and the intervention specialists kind of take control of that. With the Move 2 students, it's really the classroom teachers. They have taken ownership of those Move 2. When we first started this process this year, we talked about our Move 2 students, and it kind of was a bit of a struggle for the teachers because we're only going to focus on 2 students, and we're only going to move those 2 students ahead. And so it took a little bit of the conversation to get past that, and that no, we're still focusing on everybody. We're still providing the interventions and scaffolding and moving all of the kids forward, but we're focusing on those 2 kids that fall just below the proficiency level and giving them a little extra attention and focus. And they're not 2 kids that get pulled out, but they're 2 kids that we are progress monitoring, but they receive, and the kids who are already proficient still receive the same sorts of instruction along the way. And as we move forward and got past that struggle, teachers are now beginning to see the value in it. The conversations that people are having with parents, the conversations that they're having with the students and setting goals and moving forward is pretty powerful. If I can step back a little bit, so Lori talked a little bit about the data and the assessments that we shared with them. So with the little guys, we talked about the Ames Web assessments and determined that, okay, the 50th percentile in the nation, they're just below that level, right around, hovering around that level, but they're not yet proficient. We targeted those kids. And during that conversation, we talked about their attendance, and we talked about parent involvement, and we talked about, can we get everybody on board and kind of moving toward the same direction in the school and out of the school. So we shared with parents during parent-teacher conferences, okay, these are the areas that we want to work on. And we didn't do this just with the Move 2 kids, we did this across the board. And so here are the materials, here are the things that we're working on, begin to help us to move them along the way. And so they're aware of the goals and how to assess, and so they're, for example, in the 2nd grade, where most of our 2nd grade classes are working on fluency. And so we've sent home a chart. They, on Monday, get a poem that, say, in one class, and on Monday they read it, and it takes them 2.5 minutes. And by Friday, they have to practice with 10 different people, and they sign off on it. And so we're involving the home and things. And then when they bring it back, it's 45 seconds. And so the kids are really proud of themselves, and they're graphing themselves, and they're setting goals, and those kinds of things. So it's pretty powerful. So after looking at the assessments and choosing those 2 students, we have written our SMART goals. And on the SMART goal pages that we have the interventions used, the frequency in which it happens, the literacy goals, the targeted New York Core learning standards, and then the SMART goals with the how many words they may grow, say, in fluency. With our upper grades, we decided to focus on our short answers in our ELA testing, because, as Lori explained, typically the kids who are not proficient are a question or 2 or a point or 2 away from becoming proficient. And we determined as a school last year, we began this focus, that if we worked on our short answers, it's very easy to get those points. So the short answers are worth 2 points, the long answers are worth 4. But if they just restate the question, they've gotten a point. If they get 2 details or add 2 details during their writing and include that from evidence from the reading, they've gotten their 2 points, and then they become proficient with just 1 question. And typically in the test, there's 2 or 3 short answer questions, and so that's 6 points, and so it seems pretty simple, okay? So after we do that and set up our SMART goals, we assess. And so the teachers, the classroom teachers, are progress monitoring these students. It's not the reading teachers, it's not the instructional support, it's actually the reading or the classroom teachers. And as I explained, they've taken on really progress monitoring anybody that the reading specialists do not. And so it started off as a Move 2, but now it's kind of, okay, my whole class. And so I have sheets in my binder in my office of, even the kids that we haven't identified. Jimmy's got this many words at this date, this many words at this date, this many words at this date, this many words at that. And so it's very easy to have those conversations, and it leads to the next step of, okay, well, how do we get everybody to move? Or what are you doing differently that I'm not doing? And so it takes the scary piece out of the conversation, I think, a little bit. And so they're more open to talking about things, and it's a student, but it's also a number. And so how did you get their numbers to move? Sorry.
May not be formal, but people are talking about best practices.
Correct.
For moving a couple.
And so with our binder, the teachers bring in their results to me, and sometimes I may be there, other times I may not be there. But typically when they come in, I had a wonderful conversation on Friday with a 2nd grade teacher about how the gains that the students are making are phenomenal in the fluency and how is that happening and you know they're excited about it to talk about it and I'm like, it's Friday, I want to go home, but we were there until 3:30 for an hour talking about how our kids are fluent. So anyway, so everybody's excited about it and everybody, you know, they're getting a lot out of it. And so then part of the SMART goal process was what assessments are we going to use along the way. And so, you know, Lori's talking about the interim assessments with the multiple choice and the short answers. We really focus on for our Move 2 kids the short answer piece and the results of that. And so we compared the October, the December, and then the February along the way. And so you can see, for example, here, red not good, green good, white good, and so it progressively gets better as we go along. And so, you know, teachers are proud of that, and they've really bought into it. And then the last piece that is truly, I think, the value is the conversation that teachers are having with kids, the conversation that they're having with parents, and then the conversation that the administration is having with the teachers. And it's much like the APPR process. It's not, and I got you. I mean, I've had teachers come in and say, Mr. Ring, I got to change this kid. He's not moving. He's just, and that's not the point. We're okay. They're not moving. What can we do differently so they do move? You know. So we take that step back and we take the excitement out of it and the oh my gosh, I'm not moving this kid, and so I'm going to lose whatever pay or job or whatever. And it's not that. And so they've become understanding of that, and they're much more open to the conversation. Okay, well, let's go talk to the reading specialists about this, and let's go do those kinds of things. And then we, as a building, also kind of changed our resources a little bit. Not changed, but reallocated them a little bit, where our reading teachers really do work with the intervention kiddos. But the piece between January and test taking, we have a group in each grade level that works with the reading specialist, and they are our Move 2 kids. And they're a bigger group, so they're typically 8 to 10 kids, but they're kids that are, so they're teaching the same thing and going over the same thing that the classroom teacher is going, and so they're getting that double dose, much like our foundation program. And so they're moving along, and we had the IFL in yesterday, and it was phenomenal. We were in the teachers' classrooms, and the things that they were talking about doing with second and third grade kids was just, I mean,
it sounds exciting, and your enthusiasm is
and then
almost palpable here.
The last part, I'll stop talking. The last part is, I'm sorry. We had our after-school program. We have a tutoring program where we have identified K through 2 Move 2 kids, and so we have 6 teachers, 20 kids who come after school. And again, it's geared toward the lower early intervention. So by the time they get to 3rd and 6th grade, they're not learning the skills, but rather honing their skills, and so they're doing much better on the short answer. And we don't just focus on the short answer, but that's what we've decided to focus on for the Move 2.
That sounds great. I'm really happy to hear about the parent piece of it, though. I think that's so important for our kids to have.
It is important, and I think that teachers, I think there's an apprehension at first about, oh my, you know, they're going to know what we're doing or not doing and kind of stuff, but they're kind of past that now, and so it really has made a difference.
That's great.
Is there a level of teacher accountability with this? If a teacher has their Move 2 students and they don't move, is there a level of accountability that's put back on the teacher?
Well, I think the thing that we all understand is that teachers want what is best for the children regardless, so they kind of hold themselves accountable in this respect. It's not really used in APPR and evaluation or anything, but they want kids to move, and they care so much that they kind of hold themselves accountable. And sometimes I have to kind of talk them off the cliff and like, it's okay, we'll figure it out kind of thing. And so there's not that official me holding it over their head, you haven't moved them, but me kind of guiding them, and I think other administrators kind of guiding them to that, well, what can we do differently, or how can we do that, or what haven't we discovered yet?
And I think my question is stemming from a different perspective.
Okay.
I think if the teacher were held accountable, I have this image that student is just naturally going to get more attention. And then what are we doing for our non-Move 2 students? If the teacher's held accountable for these 2 kids, are they going to be getting more attention?
No. And that's kind of what the struggle was at the beginning that I spoke about, is that sort of thing. What about the other kids? And if those kids don't progress, what's going to happen? And it took us a little while to get past that, but the understanding is that good instruction is good instruction. So if we're instructing the Move 2 kids really good or well, then we're instructing all the other students in the classroom as well. You know, and so that they are progressively going to move with those Move 2 kids. So it's not a focus just on really those 2. It's just a way of looking at, okay, we're keeping everybody else proficient and then moving those 2 along, and everybody else as well.
One way to conceptualize that is if you think of the 2 kids as a case study. It's a place to practice the diagnostic and prescriptive process. digging in deeply with these two kids. What are their learning barriers? What's getting in the way? What do we think is a good prescription to get through that? And then what do we learn from that to apply to a whole group instruction? So it's kind of a place where folks can, rather than try to analyze what's happening with 27 kids, let me start with these two, get to understand, what's really going on there, and then what lessons can we generalize.
Any other questions? The three of you have presented all that you're presenting to us. We thank you. Are there any other questions for Lori, Sean, or Tonda? All right, hearing none.
You look at the data.
Thank you much.
Questions or opportunities for me to learn, so I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know I emailed a couple this afternoon, so. When does the third quarter end? I'm interested in what the next report will look like.
I don't have the date off the top of my head.
I have trouble knowing these quarter ends, so I'm just curious. Okay.
I'll find out.
We're moving on to policy update. We have a resolution adopting, did I skip something? I skipped something. I know I did. Grant update. Lori, you're back, right?
Is that next week?
I had it on the agenda for this week. Well, we'll put it on next week. It might be part of the budget stuff. This was a regular meeting, and so I thought we were doing the grant update. All right, so I was correct in the first place. We are on to policy update, and that is a resolution adopting the following policies. The first one, policy 1611, is the business of the annual district election, and that one is actually being removed from our list of policies because it was highly redundant with the prior policy. Policy 3230 is regarding public complaints. Policy 3240, information disseminated through students. Policy 3250, parent-teacher organization, and Policy 3271, solicitation of charitable donations from school children. This is our second reading, so I will accept a motion to approve this resolution concerning these 5 policies.
So moved.
Moved by Ann, second.
Second?
Mark? Any further discussion concerning these 5? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We have a resolution approving the placement of certain special education pupils. I just need to click to the resolution here. And I will accept a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Moved by John, second.
Second.
Dharam. Any questions concerning this resolution? All right. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, that passes. We have personnel items, resolutions approving consent items 8A1 through 8B4 concerning certain personnel actions. I will accept a motion to approve these items.
So moved.
John, second.
Second.
Mark? Any discussion concerning the personnel items? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, and then we have our business items. Just a second, I'm going so quickly, I've got to get back to the business items here. Okay, the first one is Resolution 9A1. It's a resolution appointing various annual school election and budget vote positions and authorizing payment. I will accept a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Dharam, second.
Second.
Ann? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have Resolution 9A2, setting forth the polling places, publication of certain notices, and the rules and regulations in relation to, for each school election district, for the school elections to be held during the 2015-16 school year. I'll accept a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Mark, second.
Second.
Dara, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. And then we have Resolution 9B, authorizing the establishment of an extra classroom activity account for a PBIS team at Schenectady High School / SCLA, Steinmetz Career and Learning.
So moved.
Okay, and I hadn't even asked yet. Ann moved that, second?
Second.
John. PBIS team is, PBIS is the.
Positive Behavioral Intervention
Behavioral.
Services?
Right. I knew that. It was on the tip of my tongue. All those in favor of this resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. That brings us down to the opportunity for anyone present to address the board regarding any of the actions we've taken this evening, or any comments you'd like to make. I'd like to, Kanima?
Good evening again. I just wanted to get some clarification on the Move To strategy that was talked about here tonight. I don't see how this would be sufficient or help the students here in the city school district if you're only going to take 2 students at a time to just concentrate on them to get them to the proficient level. Why wouldn't that be done as a whole opposed to just picking 2 students? And I can see this being a quick fix if you're talking about numbers and just trying to get the graduation rate up, but if we really are looking to have our kids be successful, then I don't think this strategy is actually going to work. So I would just ask before you guys, I'm not sure if they were proposing this for something that the city school district to adapt, but if it is, I would just strongly urge you guys to just look into it and see how it's ultimately in the long run going to help our students. It may be a quick fix in the short term, but I don't think this is what we need as the city school district for a long-term goal.
Thank you. Did you want to reply, or?
I can, yeah. So it's not intended to at all be neglectful of all of those other students. So as Sean talked about, it does not replace any other interventions. But what it does do is bring the ability for the general ed teacher to focus additionally on 2 students who otherwise would not be receiving any of that additional attention. Use those 2 students to analyze what their learning barriers are, how that teacher might adjust their instruction to provide those students more effective learning, and then extend that learning across to their whole class group.
So we still have academic intervention services for
Right.
the children that.
So all of those other students that you're talking about are getting all of those other services that they were getting before. So the reading teachers are still addressing particular students. Special ed teachers are still addressing particular students. But this is not at the expense of any of those things. This is an additional 2 students, in addition to all of those other services that other kids are getting.
And Larry, if I understood him correctly, he felt that the teachers, in finding out what worked for those 2 students, could generalize it to the rest of the class.
Right. It's an opportunity for them to grow and change their own practice. To serve other kids. I'd be happy to spend time with you and talk more about it afterwards.
Are there any other comments, board members? Any other suggestions? Or
I just have a comment, Kathy. And this is not about anybody here, but when we have something like this in front of us, it should be on a board so other people can see it in the audience, or they don't know what we're talking about. And I don't know if there's some way when it's on
We're
board
working on it.
docs. Okay.
We're working
on
on
board
it.
Because
docs.
if it's on board docs, couldn't we put it up on that screen instead of the agenda temporarily, or?
And all of these will be posted to our website.
Yep.
Tomorrow
That was just-
or shortly.
Or as soon as
They're
Karen
presented to
comes
us
back.
first. Kanima has another question.
I do. Can I just ask one more thing? Mr. Spring and all the board members, in their quarter report, they talked about the discipline still being disproportionate. How are you guys going to act upon that? Because this has been an ongoing issue for the Schenectady City School District. If I remember back in 2012, I think the federal government came out with their first report in regards to this. So how do you guys plan to address this disproportionate when it comes to minorities in the Schenectady City School District?
So we continue to have training for all of our staff. And at the end of every quarter, we ask each building to go through a worksheet to figure out, just where there is disproportionality, to identify causes of it, where that might be happening, and develop an action plan to begin to address that. So it's something that's ongoing. We continue to devote a significant amount of our time administratively regarding the work that we do in professional development and work that we do with our staff to address those causes.
Okay. Items for future agendas? Does anyone have anything to put on the agenda?
I know we're in budget season, but I think, given this has come up a few times recently, can we have an update on how we're doing in terms of restorative justice, and maybe looking at, as we look forward to redoing the code of conduct this summer, or reviewing it, maybe we can, look at how that might impact the code of conduct, because it has come up a couple times.
Is that something that folks
Is that
are
everybody
interested in?
Kind of interested in that? Where we're headed?
I know we've had a few little updates about trainings for people in restorative justice, but I'm kind of interested to know how it's being implemented and how it's working, and if we could use it in other ways, I suppose.
Any other items? Okay. Then, if we will be having executive session. And I would entertain a motion to go into executive session based on our section 105(1)(f), I think it is, to discuss personnel items. I don't have that.
Yep.
At any rate, may I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Moved by John,
Second.
second by Mark. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And where will we be? Down in room 134?
132A.
132A, okay. Thank you, and our next meeting is next Wednesday, March 9th. Once again, it is here at the Mount Pleasant, and we will be discussing budget primarily at that meeting, unless there's some other major event. All right, thank you very much.